27 October 1982. This is Joe Todd. Interview with an interview with Lovenna Barnes, Cravens-Staggs, and Margaret May Poteet. Okay. Miss Barnes, what year were you born?
1881. November the 4th.
So next month you'll be 101 years old.
That's right.
Okay. When did you first come to Oklahoma?
Well, we come in about 3 weeks after the run, mother and we 3 girls. This one a little older than me. She was 18 months older than me, and we lost her about 5 years ago.
Mm-hmm. What was your first impression of Oklahoma?
Well, we thought it was wonderful because it was just a wild prairie, with full of flowers, daisies all colors. Many of you don't know what daisies is, but we had the white daisies and the striped daisies and the purple daisies and the bluebells and old indigo plant.
Where did you come?
Soapweed.
Where did you come from?
Well, I was born in Indiana. We come to Toronto, Kansas, and lived there till I was. I'll move. I'll run over his feet.
No, you're not in my way.
Well, I was going to run over her feet.
Okay, and you mentioned soapweed?
What?
You mentioned soapweed?
Yeah, and the blue. Oh, indigo plant.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And the grass, the ground hadn't much of it been turned yet, only just what people wanted to know that it was theirs and to build the sod houses.
Mm-hmm. Where did you all settle?
Where?
In Oklahoma.
Well, a block 3 miles from Guthrie, a block north and a block east of the cemetery, where the cemetery is now.
Mm-hmm. The city cemetery?
Mm-hmm. The Guthrie Cemetery.
Mm-hmm. What was the first home you lived in? Was it a sod house?
Why, Dad he built a sod room about the size of this one, from what I can remember. I know that's where we cooked and ate.
About, what, 10 by 12 feet?
Well, just about the size of this room. Mm-hmm. And he didn't have the roof on it. He just had the frame up, the sides and the ends. And we cooked and ate in that, inside there. And then what furniture Mother sent down when we took those to, we lived in Coffeyville, Kansas, about 6 weeks before we come in here. They was making the run from out there, close to Coffeyville, and they had a campground there that was gathering, together before they was ready to run in here, getting acquainted with each other. Mm-hmm. So he moved us over to Coffeyville then. We lived in Coffeyville for about 6 weeks, about the middle of May. And then he came in, made the run, because Mrs. Poteet was just a baby, about 6 weeks old. Mm-hmm. And I didn't think that she could make the run. She was so tiny. And
when did you first begin school?
Well, I hadn't finished telling this yet.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Anyway, we lived in Coffeyville about till the middle of May. Then Mother told Dad she's coming in with the girls. And when we got in here, there wasn't anybody there to meet us. Dad hadn't got the letters yet. You see, they had to go to the little shack post office because we didn't have any telephones or anything like that.
That was here in Guthrie?
Yeah, right here in Guthrie, northeast of town, 3 miles. And So we come in here on the train, and between here and Coffeeville, it come up an awful storm, and it tore out the railroad track a little way ahead of us. I don't know how much, but anyway, we were stationary out there on the highway, on the railroad track. We all everybody got out of there, and this storm, the cyclone, hit the railroad track and tore it up, and then they had to have someone come out and fix it before we could come on in. When we got in here, Dad was at the depot to meet us, so she went uptown. She put us girls on the platform of the depot and told us, "Now just stay there." The baby was little, so she had to sit in my older sister's lap. My older sister was about 18 months older than I was. We lost her about 5 years ago, when she was 95. And we sat there and waited. Couldn't move. We didn't know where to move to, what to do. Only just sat where she told us to. So she finally found the team, and then she waited around and found our dad, and they come by and got us. And when they started out, we girls wondered how he knew where he was going. Of course, she was 8 years old and I was 7. And he just drove out through the country till he got to where he had settled, And all that beautiful prairie was just wonderful. And we lived in a sod house that summer without any roof on it, and then he was working at a sawmill by Perkins. And when he got shingles enough paid for over there besides his living, he put a roof on our house. So we lived in that sod house 2 years. And then he built us a 5-room home. And we used spring water to drink and cook with. And we had lots of water on our place. There's one stream run down the east side about 30 acres on the east of the little stream of water. And then on the west side, there was another little stream run through from left us about 30. So we had 100 acres of ground to farm. And we made pasture on the other 2. And of course, we didn't get any fences put up around the pastures for quite a while and just had to lariat the horses out. We didn't have any stock on them, just the team. And you just tie them to a long rope and stake them down out where they could eat lots of grass, roost it. And, our uncle from Indiana sent us a big box, not deep, full of material to make up into clothes and all kinds of garden seed, and about 100 peach fruit trees, little ones about so high, and a peck of peach seed. So as quick as he got the ground stirred he set them trees out. We had 2 of the best orchards in the country out there. These trees were born about 2 years after we set them out, and the other trees we took limbs off of the old trees that we had set out and grafted them onto the new ones when they was about 8 or 10 inches high. And my mother went out with her spade and spaded in the sod. She'd stick the spade down in the sod, and make an opening there, and planted a lot of garden seeds, corn and string beans, and pumpkins and cucumbers. So we had a nice late garden. And we had all kinds of fruit, grapes and blackberries and plums along this stream of water. And he set out the blackberry sprouts that our uncle had sent us. We had the first 10 blackberries in miles around. Oh, no, I don't know.
Then
I just have a kid memory, of it.
he asked you about your school.
Yeah, the first winter we didn't have any school. And the next summer, during the summertime, the year, why, they put up a schoolhouse, but they didn't have anything but just the framework, on the outside framework of the schoolhouse. And the second winter, we had 4 months of school. And that had got the seats in by that time, and a great big heating stove put in the middle of the room. And we had 4 months of school that time.
Where was that building located?
What?
Where was the building located?
Well, it's what we call the South Riverside. About a mile north and a mile east of the cemetery. We had to walk a mile to school, regardless of what the weather was. We wanted to go to school, we just went to school. We just got out and walked it.
Yeah. You say that's not where the school was?
Mile north.
A mile north?
Wasn't the schoolhouse just a mile north of the cemetery?
Yes,
And our house was
a mile east. And that South Riverside School was there until the last few years. I don't know how many years ago it was. They took the schools all into town,
Still in the same building?
mm-hmm.
In the same building. We had had the school in the first building that was put up. And I believe the teacher's name was Neely. He either taught the first or the second, and I don't remember just which. But anyway, that's where our school was, and that's all the schooling I ever got was out of that schoolhouse, except half a term of high school in Mulhall. I would stand up there with my brother with my half brother, when I was about 15, I guess. And I went a half a term of high school.
Did you know Zach Mulhall?
Yes, I knew the whole family of the Mulhalls.
What were they like? What was your impression of Zach Mulhall?
Well, he was just a cowboy man, come from a big city, down there in the saddle, and raised his kids up pretty wild. What was the girl's name that had the horses?
Was that Lucille?
Agnes Lucille Mulhall.
What was she like?
Well, she
Just
was just like a girl that was raised up wild. We all loved her. And she was so much different to what we were, She wore dresses up to her knees, and the rest of us had to wear our dresses down around our ankles. As we grew up, we didn't see any short skirts all the time. Even our everyday dresses was made to come to our shoe tops.
What about Logan Mulhall? Did you know him?
Well, I don't just remember all of their names, but there was a whole mess of them.
Yeah, he was the little boy that died.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He died out there. And I don't know. There wasn't much more to tell. We just lived there until I was married. I was 18 when I was married. And we lived out there. We had to carry water from this spring in the wall of the bank, and for a couple of years, so it was quite a little ways from, a block, I guess, from where he'd built his sod house. Well, he said we had to carry it uphill and downhill and through the pasture. So he was going to have water before he built his home.
Wasn't Owen Acton's wife?
Huh?
Wasn't Owen Acton's wife a Mulhall
Yes.
girl? Yeah.
Owen Acton's wife
They lived
was
here in
Mulhall.
Guthrie.
girl.
Seals. I
So
swear, I forgot
he
what
put
it is.
down a well.
I can't
He
remember.
said he'd put down the well and get water before he'd build a home, so it'd be close to the house.
But she
So he
has-
put down this well. I got a good well, and he just built the house on about 12, 15 foot from the house.
Is the house still there?
Yeah, got the house built in. And, we had literary in our schoolhouses and Sunday school and church. Whenever there was anybody go through the country, the preachers would travel through the country, you know. If they're going to be at the school, so they could be at the schoolhouse, they'd try to let everybody in miles around know. And we always had a pretty good crowd. And then they had Salvation Army come to town, and Dad liked to go to the Salvation Army. About the only church I think he ever went to. So he just hitched up his team and get all our family out, and then pick up some of the neighbors and come in to Salvation Army. And the first church they had here, some man had a big tent, and they got the word out that they would meet some night and put up that tent, and then they'd been made known that they was going to have church in it.
Where was the tent?
Down in town someplace on the dirt road, on dirt ground, you know. No, we didn't have any sidewalks or anything for a long time. So they decided one night when they'd have church, and everybody come into church. They got made the seats out of beer kegs, and got some big wide lumber boards, wood boards from the lumber yard, and laid them on the barrels that made our seats. And then they got an old organ from one of the saloons, and somebody in the crowd could play the organ. So that's the music we had. And a Methodist preacher preached the first sermon in Guthrie.
What was his name?
Huh?
What was his name?
I don't know. Just somebody that happened to come in here and settle down, you know, and he had been a preacher. So he either was a preacher or else he knew a lot about the Bible. Anyway, he preached the first sermon that was preached in Guthrie, and I don't know what his name was. In our schools, we had the 8th grade. They taught to the 8th grade in the country schools.
Then where did you go?
Well, the Guthrie, by that time they had schoolhouses in town. That was a good many years, you see. It took 7 or 8 years to get through to the 8th grade. Mm-hmm. And then they had the old high school. The spot was given to them as long as they used it for the school. And when they moved the schools all around and built the high school in town, they thought they could just sell that, you know, and use the money. Well, they couldn't sell it because that wasn't given to them to sell. As long as they could use it for a school ground, it belonged to the city. So we've always had a school on it. The junior high is a school out there now. It has been for a long time.
Okay, let me ask, are you the next oldest?
Well, anytime you get ready to talk to me, I'll talk. But you finish with her.
Well, I'm gonna.
She's the one that's got the first-hand knowledge. I can tell you after I was 3 years old, but that's all I can remember.
Well, I was going to get all three of you, your first impression, then get all of you together.
All right.
But I remember things that probably she didn't mention that might be of interest.
Yeah, I was married when I was 18. Mm-hmm. I just lived in Guthrie and around on the sod house, in the sod house 2 years and 8 years in the frame building.
Now, your maiden name was Cravens.
Yes.
What were your parents' names?
My dad's name was John A. Cravens. Everybody knew him from here to yonder. And mother's name was Mary.
What was her maiden name?
Prince.
Prince. And
we two older girls were born in Indiana.
What town in Indiana?
What?
What town in Indiana?
Well, Clarksville. It's Clark County. And that takes me up to about the time I was married. Then I got married and went to Perry and lived up there about 8 years on a farm. Then my husband, we owned a home up there, bought us a home out in the country about 8 miles northwest of Perry. And
Did you meet any of the territorial governors?
oh yes, but then we had moved to Guthrie then, off of the farm, just before the state was, what do they call it?
Statehood?
Yeah, the statehood.
Were you at the inauguration on Statehood Day?
Yes, I was, but I had 2 little kids and I didn't pay much attention to what was going on and they were watching them. And the Indians never bothered us to speak of. They'd come through and camp on Dad's land, on our homeland there, right out in the open, you know, because he had water on his place and they could water their horses. And then after we got to fencing in pastures, well, the Indians had been set aside anyway. They had been given a place to stay, you know, so they didn't bother us anymore. But they never did do us any damage or bother us in any way. They used to come and beg for something to eat, and they like to come through there and stay overnight because they could water their horses they were riding. And they'd kill a deer and they'd just spread it out on the ground to dry. And then when they got ready to go home, well, they'd roll it up like this, you know, and roll the skin that they had skinned off of it, roll that around that and tie a rope around each end and tie it onto the back of their saddle and off they go. When night come, they stopped to camp overnight while they'd roll out their meat again, flies and all. But the Indians have gone a long ways since that.
Mrs. Poteet,
Yes. Well,
when's your birthday?
my Margaret May Poteet,
And you were born what year?
1889, March the 16th.
Yeah, she's just as old as this country is.
So how old are you now?
I am 93. I'll be 94 in March.
You were born in Oklahoma?
No, I was born in Toronto, Kansas.
And
That's
how
the
old?
reason. That's the reason we couldn't come in with Dad, you know, because she was a baby, just a little tiny baby.
When did they bring you to Oklahoma?
I beg pardon.
When did they bring you to Oklahoma?
The 12th day of May, the same year.
What's your first memory of Oklahoma?
Well, now that you're getting to where I can kind of talk. I think that was the spring that I was 4. But earlier before March, I had a half brother that wasn't with us, but he was over in Indian Territory. Mother was expecting Blanche, and Dad and Mother taken me and little brother Charlie, there was a tiny little fellow walking, in the lumber wagon, and went over to bring Isaac home. Well, we stopped on the way at a campsite where there'd been blocks fixed for a fire. And Dad went to water the team down over the bank, and Mother was preparing a lunch. And a man came riding up, very nice-looking man with, I remember his pretty hair, and of a lovely horse. I'm the lover of wild animals, well, any farm animal. Well, as he come up, why, he tipped his hat, and Mother said, "Have a cup of coffee." You know, everybody was friendly at those times. So anyway, she gave him a pint of coffee, and he drank it and thanked her and drove on. And by that time, Dad was back to the wagon, and he said, "Mary, do you know who that man was?" And she said, "Oh, I haven't any idea. I just gave him a cup of coffee." He said, "That was Zip Wyatt." You know who Zip Wyatt is? Well, he's a noted outlaw that was killed. He was one of the gang that originated out at Cowboy's Flat here in Oklahoma. And anyway, he was one of a band of outlaws. They turned outlaw. They were cattlemen, and they turned outlaw when they took their free range away from them. But anyway, I remembered Zip Wyatt.
And you say he was killed?
Did you?
You say he was killed?
Well, yes, later on he was shot in a cornfield before he was captured. Then Isaac came home with us, and we had a small house, and by that time there was Charlie, Annie and Vane, and father and mother, and I was a baby. And then Charlie was younger than me. I was not quite, a little older, but Blanche was the baby. So anyway, it was crowded, and Dad pulled a house that had been he had been contested, but the contest had been settled friendly, and so he paid the man for the little shack, and we moved that up into the house, and it was used for a smokehouse. Well, Mother put Isaac's bed up in that, probably twice the length of this from the house. Well, I was running and playing with the dog, and Isaac was playing with us, calling to us, and I fell over the dog and broke my arm. And an Indian woman, we didn't have a doctor, that's the only point I bring out. We didn't have any doctor. It was 4 miles of town with a lumber wagon and a little kid crying with a broken arm.
How old were you?
That was 4-year-old that summer, that spring. And but anyway, this Indian woman come running over, and she said, "Well, I can set it." So she set my arm, and it was broken right here. But we just set it just. Of course, now they didn't have anything for pain. So I remember my half-brother carrying me, and Mother left. She had me on her lap, but she turned me over to him and went to take care of Blanche. Blanche was a baby by that time. So then that was I wanted to bring out that we had the Indians offered their assistance. Well, shortly after that, we had a cyclone. Now, does this have any interest?
Yes, ma'am.
Well, if any time I talk about something you're not interested in, just tell me to shut up.
Nope. Go right ahead.
Well, anyway, Anna and Vanna and me and Charlie and Blanche was the baby, but we were the children that was at home. Well, the cyclone was terrible. Well, Mother taken Blanche, and my oldest sister taken Charlie. And Vanna was just a big step of a girl, and she was doing pretty well to make it on her own. But she blew across the little bridge and come on, and it wasn't only just a few minutes after that she turned and got back till the water flooded that bridge. She come that near being in the flood. But the cyclone struck, and it tore that little house that my half-brother had just stepped out of. He said when he stepped out, it was just like stepping out of a boat. It just went up in the air, and when it come down, it crashed, and those boards was all through the air. One struck my mother on the back of the head and knocked her down, where she had Blanche in her arms. and another one struck my sister Annie across her arm here. She was carrying my brother Charlie. And of course Dad, he was doing all he was taking care of himself. But anyway, we all made it into the cave, and Mother got her. She said when she got up, she took the baby in her arms, and of course those days they wore long dresses. And Blanche slipped down through that long dress, and when she got to the cave, she said that Blanche's little feet was more than that much from the ground, that she almost lost Blanche just out of her arms. And let's see what else. Well, anyway, they after that, my brother-in-law, my half-brother, went back to Kansas to live. But I think that was about all of the cyclone. Then we had some terrific floods. Was that be of any interest?
Yes, ma'am.
Well, Guthrie was flooded. All down in the bottoms. Am I getting too close? And I remember Dad taking us in the lumber wagon. It was close. Supper. She said, we'll bring you dinner in your room. so I'll eat. Well, anyway, the flood. As we watched the storm, the flood, Guthrie was just flooded. There was people crawled up in trees. That bottom up and down along Cimarron, the cottonwood, was all grown up in tall trees. And there was numerous people up in the trees waiting. And by some means or other, somebody got across with a rope. And there was a boy that volunteered to, they fastened the rope to the canoe, and he managed to go back and forth, and he had got down some of them that was in the flooded district, and on the east side, it was shorter distance to high ground. The west side is flatter, so it flooded farther out. But there was several around it.
What year was that, Dee?
Well, it was about 4 or 5 years, about 4 years or 5 after the opening, right after this cyclone, but I couldn't tell you exactly. Well, as I can remember, as we stood there, a piece of a sidewalk floated down with a cow standing on it, and that cow was bawling and bawling as she went by. And then there was a square house that come, and it's as the bridge, the old Cimarron Bridge house that's here, just a different bridge, but the same location. That house, 4-roomed house, floated and it struck the bridge. Well, of course, it tipped, and it finally went out of sight. It sunk right there, clear out of sight, right there below. It couldn't go under the bridge. It said just barely, the bridge just barely up to above. And let's see, I took a few notes while I was sitting over there. Then something about our social life.
Yes, ma'am.
Well, the river bank, about 3 miles north, a mile north of Old Riverside School, as she told you about it, and it's 2 miles north of here. Is what they call the Cimarron Bluffs, and that had a nice picnic ground at the base of the bluffs, and then there was a hole about that big. Well, I guess a man could stand 1 foot here and one over here. And you could go up through the bluff, through that, I think maybe 10 or 15 foot. And that was quite a little arc to go through there until finally one man got bit with a rattlesnake as he went up through that. But we had fishing parties and picnics at the base of that. And then the 4th of July, there was a boy that had to put up a platform, and they had a dance. And that was quite a place to socialize. Well, we all went on a fishing party one time, and there was a party went out from town that caught We didn't have any luck for a while. There was 3 or 4 families that was, but the people from town caught 3 fish that, I imagine they were, they must have been that long.
3 feet long?
And they were big cats. Well, we was getting pretty much, the men were getting discouraged. Of course, us kids play in the water, it doesn't bother us any. But anyway, they made one last drag, so they decided they'd stay. It was getting chore time. They decided that they'd make one last drag, and they caught a fish big enough that my dad was 6 foot, and that fish, they hung it up, was just as long as he was tall. They dressed that fish and sent some of the older girls, older than me, around and to one of the neighbors and bought bread. They didn't know how to divide it. There's 4 families. They decided they'd just stay right there and fry it and eat it. So that's what they done. And when they got that fish sliced, Mother had a new galvanized tub that she had our lunch packed in. And as they cut that fish into frying-sized pieces, it made just a tub full, one fish. And the eggs, Dean, was it a gallon?
What?
Wasn't a gallon of eggs that big fish had in it?
Oh, I think so. And we had,
But
they
anyway,
made
that was
five 3-gallon buckets full of fish without a bone in it that we ate for supper that night.
That's a lot of
But anyway, we had literary, and we had Sunday school, and there was an old man, I knew his name, Fred Winter, organized Sunday school all over the county. And he was a grand old pioneer, died a few years back. But anyway, he organized Sunday school after I was old enough to remember. And I don't know what happened before that, but then after I was 4 or 5 years old, I remember going to Sunday school. And he had a boy that was a mental case. And I know he always brought that boy with him. And I thought, we all thought that was such a fine way for him to do, to take the boy out with him. Well, anyhow, Maud was born, and not long after Maud was born, Annie and Vane was married, and that left me the oldest at home when I was 10. So I helped wherever I was needed, learned to plow, let the team run away with the harrow one time. I think I was about 8, 9 years old that time. They put the old door, I believe it was, on the harrow, and then I sat on that when we had an old gentle team. But I seen a big centipede, and I wanted to kill that centipede, and when I hit it with the whip, the horses run away, and I upended and went back off with it, and they left me. But I enjoyed the farm life. I enjoyed anything there was to do. I had a brother then 2 years younger, but whatever he suggested, why, he and I tried to do. Then we, after I finished Riverside School.
Going to have lunch with us?
Well, I'm going to wait till supper.
I'm sure you won't finish up. Okay, I'll tell them in the kitchen there'll be an extra one for lunch.
Well, when do you serve lunch?
Honey, what do you go on? And you-
Well, now whenever you get tired of me, I'll quit. Well, anyway, after Maud was born, why, it wasn't long until I finished the 8th grade. I didn't take the examination for some reason or other. Well, I had a married sister that I believe I went to stay with her. So anyway, Nora Muxlow later on she was our teacher then, and later on when I got ready for high school, why, I was out of school a year on account of a sickness in the family. And when I went to go back, why, I suppose I'd have to do what they called preparatory at that time. But anyway, Nora Muxlow had gone to old Reverend Calvert, old preacher, Professor Calvert, who was the head of the first high school here, the Logan County High School. And she told him, let me on trial that I could carry the work. So anyway, I went on trial and I made it. Then later on, took a little I made an effort to go to business college, but I'd taken typhoid fever and I never went back. Then I married when I was 22. I was collecting for the Guthrie Daily Leader when I was married. I had been for 2 or 3 years. At that time, they turned the paper over to the boys, and the boys paid them. Then we collected. The party that received the paper didn't pay the boy. But then the leader hired women to go around and do the collecting. So I was collecting when I married my husband.
What was your husband's name?
Bud Poteet, and he was the son of a pioneer. I've got a little piece of poetry here, if you care to read it, that would probably give you a little more of an idea of my life in Oklahoma.
Why don't you read it?
And you don't need to return it. Now then, if you want to go to dinner, why, you make me shut up.
Why don't you read the poem and we'll get it on tape?
Oh, I just assumed you'd take it.
Okay.
Go ahead. I'm not going to say anything.
I had a friend. I had a friend that liked it, and she typed me off about a dozen of them. So I think on the back of that, I put.
Yes, there it is.
Now that was read. I read that on the television last year, and they wanted it, and I sent them a copy. And Gene Audrey, I sent him a copy. I said, "Now I'm not giving you the poem, but you can use it to anything you want to use it, anywhere you want to use it, towards in the memories of our pioneers." So I'm the same way. If you want to use it, put it in your paper, put it in your ashtray.
Thank you. Mrs. Staggs.
I told you all I knew. They just had a big cotton crop.
Well, tell us about the cotton patch.
Heaven forbid.
Oh, first of all, when were you born?
Really, I don't have nothing to say.
When were you born?
Huh?
When were you born? What year?
1892, 3, wasn't it? Nay, when was I born, or was I ever born? 1893.
What month?
March the 21st.
So you remember the cotton patch.
Yeah, I remember the cotton patch.
Tell us about it.
Oh, it's just, well, there's just a great big field of cotton. Anybody knows what a cotton patch is?
How large was it?
Oh, heavens, I don't know. Maybe 10, 15, 20 acres.
And you out there chopping cotton?
I was chopping cotton, but I didn't mind chopping cotton. That was fun. I could walk backwards and chop cotton because I couldn't see how far the end of the row was. But when it come to picking cotton, that hurts your back. And I didn't like to pick cotton.
Did all three of you pick cotton?
I think so.
Okay, do you all remember the Spanish-American War?
Yes.
What'd you do during the war?
The Spanish-American War.
Yeah, 1898. Did you do any activities during the war?
I don't remember it.
Yeah, the older girls did. I was married in 1900.
Well, but this is 1898. Spanish-American War.
Did you do any activities for the troops, at the volunteers?
Wasn't that the...
Those are Rough Riders.
I don't think we did much for them.
Mm-hmm.
That is for
Out of our young
1898.
folks out there,
He wants to know if we did
we had
anything
one man out of our
for the war in 1898.
Was that the
Spanish-American War. Well, that is...
Spanish-American War?
That is
Well, yes, a little bit. We had a cousin or two that served in that war from Indiana, and quite a few of the neighbor boys here was.
There was just one out of our outfit when we went into that one.
And,
That was Hattie Barnes' brother.
And a lot much so from here. Oh, I don't mean in our particular neighborhood, Veen. I mean you're around Guthrie. Lon Muxo was served, and he was quite a man around town after he come back, and he got to be a policeman. And then he was finally killed during the time, kind of an upheaval after we got...
He's raiding the bootlegging joints for it was.
after they quit letting us have whiskey. What do we call it?
Prohibition.
Prohibition, yeah. I'll tell you, prohibition means so little I even forgot what to call it. But anyway, that was Lon Muxlow. And a cousin, Jess Stepton from Indiana. And one of the Cravens boys went from Indiana. They were our cousins.
Were there any activities for the soldiers that went to the war here in Guthrie?
I didn't understand you.
Were there any activities for the soldiers here in Guthrie that were going to the war?
Well, you mean of the Spanish and Americans?
Yes, ma'am.
I think that as a rule, we always had a decoration day and the 4th of July and such as that, you know. We always celebrated. And, of course, my dad was an old Southern. He was in the war between the North and the South. He was a Northern soldier. And he was still a soldier when he died. He'd walk like a soldier and cuss like one. But anyway, we went to everything that was in his form of the celebration. But the Muxlow family and our family were very closely associated. Mm-hmm. And Lon, I know when I was working out one time, he was on the police force here. And his wife was the one that got me into high school on trial. So the Muxlows were close friends. But they were, I don't remember of any other soldier that we was really in, that I can remember of. Of course, there were probably a lot of them. But
what about World War I? Did you all, were there any activities during the First World War?
At that time, in World War I, my husband and I was appointed to go to work here at the old federal jail. You want to talk to them first?
She's through.
I don't know anything about it.
I'm supposed to be... I did a lot of knitting. That was my hobby during the First War. Mm-hmm. I did a lot of knitting. You know, boys wore slip-over sweaters, and they wore wristbands, and they wore socks that we all knit for them. And I was working at the laundry at that time, and us girls, we wouldn't hardly eat our dinners until we rushed to our knitting bags. And I learned to knit everything, I guess, that they knitted for them. But I never could learn to put a heel in a man's sock. So when I got that far along, Mother always had to finish the heel in the sock. But I don't remember.
Did you work during the First World War?
During the First World War, we had been appointed, my husband had been appointed a deputy here in Guthrie under Bill Sherwood. And we handled the old federal jail. And he was a jailer, and I overseen the trustees. There was 6 in the kitchen. And I bought the food for the kitchen and made out the menu and helped in emergency. But I had 6 trustees that done the real work. And I would search the women, which wasn't a very pleasant thing sometimes. I'd search a drunk Indian. Or maybe to bring in, at that time there was a lot of dope trouble. And search rough women. And for every strip start naked and search them for dope that they might be handling. And so anyway, my husband and I got patriotic. We had a good job. It wasn't big pay like you do nowadays, but we saved enough that we bought 80 acres.
Well, everything wasn't high like it is nowadays either.
What was it, Bean?
I said everything wasn't high like it is now.
Oh,
anyway.
no. But anyway, we quit our job we went at it backwards. We quit our job, and my husband went up. I was going to go into nurse's aid, and he was going to join the Army. We got real patriotic. He went up to take the examination and failed. There he was, without his job. So we went to the oil field a while. I had a brother-in-law that was foreman at oil field at old fiddlestick. Well, anyhow, the southern part of the state. And we went down there, and we had quite a good life there. I organized a little country Sunday school, and a man that had been a commissioner when we first went to work for the jail. In the meantime, we stayed there now until there was a new sheriff at the jail, Ed Robinson. So anyway, everything went on just fine, man, until later on my husband's health failed, and we had to quit. We had to leave town, had to get out in the country. We had to take him TB. We knew he was frail, but didn't know that he was that frail. But we had come back from the oil field and worked at the jail again and got the old job back. And then we had to go to they said that you just have to go to the country. And I said, if I'm going to help make the biggest part of the living, I won't stay in town. And the doctor said, May, he won't live 6 months. And I said, we'll go to the country tomorrow. But he lived 25 years. He had a good life.
Well, I'm in notion going to dinner.
Bought a half of the old homestead. And now there's oil and gas on it, but I sold it. Oh, I do have a little acreage. I may eventually get a little something out of it, not much.
Who was the most famous person that you all met? The most famous person that you've met.
What is it?
Who was the most famous person that you met, that you remember?
Oh, I don't know. I just like everybody.
Well, I met Gene Autry. We
I
was his
don't know.
special guest at our 89ers.
Good.
Going up there this year. Yes.
I just think everybody's great.
Mm-hmm. Were all of you at Statehood Day when they inaugurated Governor Haskell in 1907?
Yeah.
Were you there?
I lived in Guthrie. We had just moved back from moved here after we had spent about 8
But I
years.
don't remember very much about it.
We had just was married in 1900, and this was in 1907. I had 2 babies, or tots. One of them wasn't very old. And he lives here in town now. Has lived in town. This has been his home for years. And just he and his wife.
Now, would that include the marriage of Indian Territory in old Oklahoma?
Yes, ma'am.
Well, I went to that. I was in high school by that time. Go ahead, and then I'll tell you about this.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Veen. Well, anyway, my friend of mine, she's here in the home, too. We was told to go down and take notes and for our literary class. So anyway, we take notes, and I remember the cowboy, well-dressed, neat, a gentlemanly-looking man acted as Oklahoma. And then the Indian bride, which represented Indian Territory, was beautiful. She had on a buckskin dress, a lot of fringe, just cleared her feet. And then the overdress come down about to her knees, and there's fringe about this much on the dress skirt, and then on this overdress, and then fringe here. And she had 2 heavy braids of black hair that come almost to her knees, and a lot of beads. But it was very solemn. Now, it was reenacted here a couple of years ago, 3 years ago, but it wasn't a bit like it was then. It was more of a burlesque here. They made a fun racket out of it. But you know, that was a very serious occasion. And anyway, I did go to that.
We got you set up.
Oh, they wasn't so bad.
Mrs. Staggs, will you tell us again about was a restaurant you say you had?
A little it was down by the interurban station. A little hamburger. A little kid says, well, Daddy, don't call this joint a dump. Just a little shack. And sold hamburgers for 5 cents a piece or 6 for a quarter.
Hmm.
And then I went in, put in a cafe, and I sold fried chicken dinners.
What was the name of the cafe?
Staggs.
Staggs.
Staggs Cafe.
You say, I'm sorry.
Sold for fried chicken dinners for $1, and that included everything: your dessert, and your drink, and your pie, and just anything you wanted.
What year was this when you opened this?
Well, let's see. I came here in '26. I think I run the hamburger joint in 26 and 27 and 28. Then I opened up. We moved up in the other part of town, where the red and white grocery store used to be, because they're closed now. But right across the alley from that was a little old 2-story house. It used to be the men's camp house when this country first opened up. And I paid $5 a week rent for a place to run the place of business. And I think we had 3 rooms upstairs to live in.
Where was your cafe located?
On North Division.
You said that's by the interurban station?
No, the hamburger joint was down by the interurban station.
Where was the interurban station? Where was that located?
Well, do you know where the depot used to be, or is now?
Yes, ma'am.
Well, it's right up the hill from that, about a block and a half.
Where did the interurban run to?
Oklahoma City and Norman. I think we could ride to Oklahoma City for $1.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it cost us 35 or 40 cents to go to Norman. I was living in Norman at that time, but then. And then I put in this cafe.
How long did you have the cafe?
I closed up in 28, went out of business. My husband was sick. I was taking care of a sick husband.
What was your husband's name?
Ernest, or Cravens-Staggs.
Mm-hmm.
He has folks living in Oklahoma City. But he was sick, and I had to do something to help him make a living. We'd spent all the money we had on doctor bills. You know, they don't take long for doctor bills to eat your pocketbook out. Mm-hmm. And we come together on a visit. And he was going to go down to the depot that evening to get our tickets back to Norman. We lived in Norman. And she went by this little place, a lady that was running it, we knew in Norman. And she said, well, Staggs, what are you doing up here? And he said, well, we're just getting ready to go back home, back to Norman. Well, he was sick, wasn't able to do anything. And she said, come in, sit down, let's visit a while. Well, she said, she had hay fever so bad. She said, well, I've got to get out of this joint. She said, I've just got the hay fever so bad. She says, tell Blanch, that's me, to come down here and I'll rent it to her. Sell it to her, get rid of it somewhere or other. Well, he said, I don't know whether she'd be interested or not, but he said she can come by and see. Well, it was up to me to make the living. And I went down and we bought the little old shack out. Run it about 2 years. Then went put in a cafe, sold dinners.
When did they brick the streets of Guthrie? What year? Do you remember?
What did they do what?
When they paved the streets in Guthrie, put the brick streets in?
I don't know.
Well, I can tell you when they paved it out in the 600 block on East Smyrna.
When?
In about 1908. We was building with a big home up on Violets, or up on Smyrna. Was going to keep the roomers so I could help make a living too. And during the time we was building this big house up in the 600 block, 12-room house, I was going to rent out the upstairs rooms, you know. And Oklahoma City got the capital away from us, so I couldn't get a roomer without boarding them. And I had 10 railroad men there for several years, and they paid me $3.50 a week, board and room. You can't go downtown now and buy a decent meal for less than that.
What was your idea on moving the Capitol? What do you think about it?
I don't know.
I didn't move it, they stole it.
I've heard so many stories about it that I just don't. And then they're building we'd started to build the Capitol, here in Guthrie. So they, a bunch of what went in there? Real estate men, I think, went in there first. And run it a while. And then we had a college from someplace moved in there and stayed a couple of years. And then the Masons took it over and they made the big Masonic temple.
Mm-hmm.
Finished it up and made a temple out of it.
Now that's the little building behind the Masonic temple?
No, that's the temple itself.
Oh, the temple itself. Okay.
All this went on in that temple.
Mm-hmm.
The Masons finally got a hold of it and they finished it up and made a big temple out of it.
Okay, they had actually started the Capitol building?
Yeah. My brother-in-law worked on it when it started. Laying a brick, he was a bricklayer. So we lost the Capitol and I lost the borders. Or I picked up the borders. I had to board them to even get to rent a room. $3.50 a week.
Where was your boarding house?
Well, it wasn't called a boarding house. We just called it our home.
Mm-hmm.
But we had 6 rooms upstairs and 6 down.
Where was it located?
And 600 block East Spring, on the south side of the street, the second house in the 600 block. And we didn't have any streets paved and thing. We had to pay for having the streets, the brick put in the street pavement on our share of it. But the streetcar runs through the middle of it, so that cut our pavements down a little bit.
Did you ever meet Joseph Foucault?
Who?
Joseph Foucault. He designed most of the buildings in Guthrie.
Oh, I don't
downtown.
know. I was so busy taking care of the 2 kids and cooking for railroaders that I didn't have time to know anything. We lived there 18 years.
Mm-hmm.
Then we went to Hutchinson and lived there 10 years and went to the Rio Grande Valley and lived down there 12 years. And then my husband passed away and I come back home and bought a home down here in the 400 block East Violet's. Just sold it a little over a year ago.
Well, anyhow, I stayed in the cafe business till 1938. And my husband got worse and I just couldn't take care of him. And after he passed away, and I got health enough back.
Mrs. Staggs, tell us about paving the streets. You mentioned the dances.
Oh, when they get a block paved, they'd let us, a bunch of us teenagers, have a dance.
I'm not giving you total control of the poetry. If I want to make more copies of it and give it away, that's my privilege.
Definitely.
And they'd bring a hay rack. I guess you know what a hay rack is, something we haul hay on. And 2 or 3 of the men that played the fiddle and guitar and things would come and they'd play and us kids would have a dance, or us teenagers, call us kids then, or brats. And we'd have a dance. And we had several of them, I just don't know how many, but anyhow we had a nice time. But then get back to my teenagers.
Well, I don't know if you can read that or not. I'm going to get some old slips out of paper and see if I can see if I've got anything that you can use.
Okay. Fine. Thank you.
This is that.
Mrs. Barnes, you say that they had actually started the Capitol building
Yes,
here in Guthrie?
that's right.
And your brother-in-law worked on it?
That's right.
And what did he do?
He was a bricklayer.
He was a bricklayer.
His name was Sheets.
Run over his feet.
No, that's fine. She's not in my way. I'm not in her way.
If I run on his foot, he'd holler. He's younger than I am. He can move. But anyway, the streetcar run up past our place, so that cut out part of the pavement, you know. We just paved in front of our house from our 2 lots to the streetcar track.
He had to pay for that paving?
Yeah, we had to pay for that.
And it was brick?
Yes.
And you say after they moved the capital, what did they do with the building that they were building?
Well, it's still there. They just gradually built it up until the grand Mason home.
Mm-hmm. Who used it before the Masons?
The what?
Who used it before the Masons? Anyone?
It's masonry only.
Mm-hmm.
It's the largest Masonic building in the United States.
When did the Masons buy that?
Well, I don't know. We had real estate. No, we had the real estate in there for about a year, and then we had the college in there 2 or 3 years, and then the Masons took it over. And it's a wonderful building. If you've never been in there, you ought to come up sometime and go through it.
I have been through it.
Have you?
In fact, I am a Mason.
My husband was a 32nd and a Shriner.
Mm-hmm.
And then I have a son that lives in San Antonio, and he's a Shriner, and a 32nd degree Mason.
Mm-hmm.
And the son that lives here is a 32nd degree Mason, but he doesn't live in the Shrine.
We've got a nephew or a niece in Oklahoma City, married a Mason, and he used to come here on 89ers Day, and he rode one little.
And these 2 girls never raised any family.
Mm-hmm.
This one here finished raising 2. She married my brother-in-law that had some children, and she finished raising them, but she never had any of her own.
How many children do you have?
I had 4 and raised. Well, the one that died first was a 5-year-old little girl, and then I raised 3 till they.
May, what's Pat's name?
Well, the oldest one's still alive, and the youngest one's still alive. I lost both of my girls. My daughter that got married, she died at 69.
May.
And she had raised 4 children.
May.
And I hear from those kids every month. They got together.
What is Pat's name? What is Pat's husband's name?
The next Sunday, and the next one,
Hayes.
the next Sunday.
Hayes, H-A-Y-S.
Sundays I don't
Hayes.
get any calls.
Mm-hmm.
I've got a nephew I married, and his name's Hayes.
Mm-hmm.
And he comes up here on 89ers Day when they have it, and he rides one little doodad.
He's a Shriner.
Hayes.
Mrs. Poteet?
I'm trying to find something that I think I've got somewhere, but you know, when you're living in a little place like this, you just stick things away.
Yeah, and she's the one that keeps track of everything, and I didn't. I just got mine by memory. And I married a
There's
farmer.
some pictures that was taken of us last year.
Good pictures.
Yeah, I give my son in Texas not a big picture of him, just me. And he had about 7 or 8 made off of it and give to all my grandchildren.
Mm-hmm.
I had a
You got
picture.
so much junk stuck in front of your picture you couldn't tell whether young Hobson's picture or yours.
What?
I said, you got so much stuff stuck in this around here you couldn't tell whether it's your picture or John
Well,
Hobson's.
I never have seen that to tell what's on it.
You know, we have so many come and interview us, and they want.
I can't tell which is upside
It's
down.
just easy to give things away, and then forgot what you done with them.
Right.
And I don't keep nothing like that.
Well, I don't either.
Yesterday's gone. Don't worry about it.
I know I had a picture of the four outlaws that that included the name of that person that I said that we must give the coffee to.
Wyatt?
But I think I'll give that to somebody else. Yeah, I expect Gene Autry got it.
Well, let me ask you a question. Same question I asked you two. What would you consider your most interesting experience in early day Guthrie?
Well, I've lived a pretty full life. I think that one of the hardest nights, this Lon Mupso that I spoke about, he became a policeman here, and they was raiding after we got the prohibition, and he and another policeman was shot and killed during the raid. I think that was one of the worst nights because they got the darky that shot him, but there was one element that wanted to string him up, hang him, and the other element wanted to leave him to the law. So that was one of the hard nights I had, that we all had.
Which side won?
Well, they didn't have a hanging. They avoided that. But this Dr. Duke was such a friend of mine that I nursed for. He was a Southerner, and he was very much in favor of stringing him up right now. And some of the men, and some of them got first one and then another of the local men. And then I know that they called on Bud to give his view, and they stood on top of an automobile to talk to the crowd. And anyway, they just called for first one and then another to volunteer to give their opinion. But finally, they left it to a vote of the crowd, and they voted to give him a regular trial. He wasn't.
What year was that?
What is it?
What year was that? Do you remember?
Well, I can count up. I was married in 22. Lived here in town. 23, we farmed. 24, we was in Colorado. It was the fall of 24.
1924.
That's one way of keeping books.
Right. What did you all do on Pearl Harbor Day? Do you remember?
Well, I remember what I done. I was working. I worked at the laundry, and I just worked. We just went ahead and.
I'll tell you where I was at.
Where?
I lived in the Rio Grande Valley in Texas. And my husband was sitting at the table. We had the radio turned on. And he was sitting at the dining room table and fixing our Christmas cards out when he got that news of Pearl Harbor. And and our son was in A&M College. And they let him finish his college and he finished it one day, and we brought him home that evening. And the next morning, when the mail come, why, he was called in the service and spent 23 years in service.
Mrs. Poteet, what did you do Pearl Harbor Day?
Well, I don't know what you're asking, but I'd like to tell you a little bit more about the most worrisome experience.
Go ahead.
Well, anyway, my father and a man by the name of Isaac Johnson, it was right after threshing, and they was hauling their wheat to town. And my father lived 2 miles farther out than Mr. Johnson, but he overtaken Mr. Johnson in his lumber wagon, double box load of feed, and Dad had. as they went north, Mr. Johnson's wheel went something wrong with it, and he had to tie his team to the back of his wagon and just leave him at the side of the road. And he got on the wagon with Dad and came to Guthrie to get his wheel repaired. He loaded it on top of the wheat. Well, after it was repaired, they started home, got their wheat. So Dad got his wheat sold, and by the time the wheel was repaired. So as they come out of Guthrie, right out north of Guthrie, there's a little swag on the old on the road that go to Division Street Road, I believe. Yes, it's a Division Street Road, and right out just a little bit south of where the new high school is now. And then there's a swag there, and there was it used to be pretty well timbered up and down this little ravine. But anyway, there was a couple of men come up from down in the brush and held them up and told them that they stuck a gun in their backs and told them to get that old team in high and get them away from there, that they had broke jail. So anyway, they drove on out, and Dad said he finally decided they was going to kill the team. It was hot weather, and he had a heavy work team hitched on, and they wanted him to drive in a run, you know. And he said, "Now, man," he said, "this is poor policy." He said, "If my neighbors sees me, my friends along this road, sees me driving my team in a gallop, they'll think some of my family died." And he said, they'll sure make me stop, or they'll all meet me when I do stop. Well, anyway, in the course of the conversation, he said, "I think if you just quiet down and let me drive the team as my natural gait." So anyway, they finally seen a little reason, and they took their guns down, and Dad said they drove a little more reasonable gait. And Johnson said to Dad, he said, "They'll get my horses." See, they was tied to the wagon back a few minutes. Dad said, "Well, I don't know what we'll do." But he said they thought for a little while, and he said, "I'll tell you, boys," he said, "if you lay down and cover up with that canvas and let me drive at a reasonable rate, we may help you get away." But he said that that's the only thing I know of. So when they laid down and covered up, why, they got past the old man's team. Well, they went a little farther, and while they still had their heads covered up, Johnson slipped out of the wagon and went to a house. And anyway, he got the word back to that they had these prisoners in the wagon. So anyway, they come on back. They didn't overtake Dad. The officers didn't overtake him. But he come to the end of our lane, and he thought, well, now if they go up the house, that's not going to be good, because Dad had guns. Mother was a good shot. She had her gun. Dad had his 1 or 2 guns, an old revolver, and so on. He said, "You better hide in that canyon." He said it wouldn't do for you to go to the house. So they got out and went down in the canyon. Well, Dad come up to the house. Of course, the first thing they done was, Dad said, he said to my mother, "Now they'll come up here and get the horses, just sure." But the law came not long after that, but they searched up and down that creek, but they never did find them. But later on, later on they was arrested in Kansas, and one of them was a member of this outlaw gang that was that originated with Zip Wyatt and out in the Cowboy Flat. But anyway, they was captured. But that was one of the times that we was all mighty edgy. Even us little kids realized that there was something wrong. Later on, Dad was harvesting that field one time that they come right down to the corner where the old lane come in was on the Indian Trail, and the old Indian Trail come along here. Well, there was a hole there in the bank. It was supposed to have been a wolf's den or something like that. But Dad was harvesting cane with a binder, cutting it, and not baling it, but just cutting it down. And the outfit just dropped right down about 6 or 7 foot all of a sudden. One horse went down, and the other managed to light in a way where he got up, but the one was tangled up so that he had to have neighbors come and help him get him out of there. And we always wondered if that wasn't a cave, because it was only a little, probably 100 feet, maybe more, inside of the fence of the bank where this big hole was that they thought was kind of, if so, there was a possibility of that was where those outlaws hid, right there in the corner of our place. That was a very worrisome night. And they never did. They didn't catch him for 4 or 5 months later, and then caught him up in Kansas.
Anything you all would like to talk about?
Yeah. I've got to get out of these bright lights
Okay.
or go blind completely. So I'll leave it to you.
Okay. Thank you very much.
And good luck. Glad to meet you.
Miss Staggs, nice to meet you.
You know, I'm blind besides being crippled. I'm crazy besides being... Oh, dear. But when this day's gone, it's gone.
Right.
And I'll just live tomorrow.
Mrs. Staggs and I lived together about 35 years, the last 35 years. She come to the home about 2 days before I did.
Mrs. Barnes, did your father tell you any stories about the Civil War?
Oh, yes and no. Sometimes he'd talk about it.
Do you remember any of them?
Anyway, he said they had quite a battle one time, and they were in a cemetery, and he hid behind a tombstone till the one that was fighting them got past. So he didn't get hurt.
Did he say what battle that was or anything?
No, oh, I expect he did, but then I don't remember.
Right.
You know, I'm lucky to have any mind at all. I've lived through so many things.
Mm-hmm.
But I guess I'm doing pretty good. I just thank the Lord every night I go to bed for the life I've lived.
Do you remember your grandparents?
Oh, my mother's father and mother I do, but I don't know whether I ever knew the others or not. I don't think I did. Now, I knew Dad's brothers, 2 or 3 of them, but his parents, I don't remember ever seeing them. I think they lived in Arkansas.
Okay.
Oh, Dad was married twice. His first wife died when they had 3 children. So 2 of them lived at home a lot, and the oldest one never lived at home, I don't think, with my dad and mother. Their aunt took them when their mother died. So the youngest one was 7 years old, and the daughter was 17 when she come home to live with the folks.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, and I grew up out there in South Riverside, went to school, had a good time. We had oyster suppers and Christmas dinners and just everything in the schoolhouse. I've had people ask me what kind of entertainments we had. Well, that's the kind of entertainments we had, and lots of parties and dances.
What was your first Christmas like around here?
Well, we was living in a little log house, or the sod house, and my sister and I, Dad and Mother went to one of the neighbors to spend the day one some Sunday. And my older sister and I, we took the notion we'd decorate for Christmas. So we got the berries, the trees were so beautiful up and down branch that run through Dad's place. There's those green cedars, and they had vines run all up through them, and they had bright red berries on them. So we went down the timber and we cut us up some cedars and limbs and a bunch of these berries, and we decorated every corner of the house. Kid-like, you know, just having a picnic. And Mother and Dad one of the neighbors visited and taking me with them. So we had company from Kansas come down, a nephew of my dad's and the son-in-law and their wives. So they had left their wives at the depot and walked out to our place. So we girls told them where Dad and Mother was, so they went by there and picked our father up. And Mother walked home about 2 miles and carried me. And during the Sunday, the Sunday before Christmas, we had decorated the house with that cedar and those berries and everything we could find that was green, because we hadn't been used to having green things in the middle of winter, you know. We didn't come from that part of the country. We come from Indiana and then to Kansas and then in here.
What kind of red berries were they? Do you
I don't know, just wild berries on vines, like
Sassafralla vein and bittersweet.
What?
Sassafralla and bittersweet.
I don't know what we call them.
Well,
But
the
anyway.
bittersweet was a yellowish red, and it popped open,
And
had a
the
little
other
red
one-
center.
And the other one was just a bright red. And when Mother got home, we had killed a couple of our chickens and had them on a boiler, cooking, and going to let her make some dumplings when she got home. And she went ahead and finished up her supper and got everything on the table and got us sit down, and about the first bite one of them took by they couldn't eat it. So she seen there was something wrong, and it got cedar in her. We had got that cedar all over the house and on our hands and on the table, and it's
And in the
couldn't
chicken?
eat any of it. So she had to get up and cook some more. Something, I don't know what we had. I expect we had some quail in the house or something like that. But anyway, everything that she had cooked tasted just like cedar. You couldn't
What kind
eat
of toys did you have?
it. Huh?
What kind of toys did you have?
Poison.
Toys that you played with?
We made them. We two girls had brought our playthings with us because our brother-in-law had just sent us for Christmas wax dolls. And I never will forget, a year or so after that, we had company and they set up so close to the fire with a holding my doll. It melted the wax on its face and then run down and just looked like tears, looked like it was crying. And I was so mad because they ruined my doll. But we made our little covered wagons out of cigar boxes and sewing thread and wheels. Spools, you know. And Dad would help us put them together. We'd cut the spool in two and use one spool would make 2 wheels. And we'd put 2 wheels in there on each side, like a wagon, and take a piece of an old worn out pillow slip or something and make the top to it, the covered wagon. And we had a wagon then like Dad drove, like we lived in the first 2 years, or the first 6 months.
And you're getting against his feet.
Huh?
That's okay.
You're getting against
Oh,
his
he
feet.
can-
That's okay.
He
I
can
can
put his
move.
feet. He can put his feet in the chair and sit on them.
Yeah, I can move.
Not very far. Not in this place.
I'll get
You
you
should
on
have come
my
in.
feet.
You should have come in here yesterday about this time. I had everything in that cedar chest out all over this place.
She take an inventory.
No, I was picking out some clothes and going to wear them when it got cold. I never have been too hot since I've been in here, but then it's going to be cold this winter. Because
Speaking of cold, how was that first winter?
Well, it was pretty cold. Did I tell you about the sod house falling in?
No, ma'am.
Well, anyway, we was laying there with by that time Dad had got the roof put on the sod house. And they'd put up 2 beds. Mother had stripped down part of her furniture and got rid of the rest of it. And we'd had that in one end of that sod walls with a little tent stretched over, waiting until we get a roof on the house. So he worked over at the sawmill. He got shingles enough over there to put shingles on the house. And it was pretty cold. And we were laying there one night, we'd all gone to bed with our heads to the wall there on the west side of the house. And the storm come up. It had snowed practically all day, and then it started to blow, a regular old snowstorm. And about 3 foot of that west wall broke loose and fell out. If it had fell in, I said they wouldn't have had to have buried us. We'd all been buried under the sod. And they got out, and the mother and dad got out in the storm and drew the canvas across there. I guess was the little tent that we'd had set in the house before it was covered. But anyway, they took that canvas and got out in the storm. They stretched it across there as best they could. And as quick as the storm was over, while one of the neighbors come and helped him put the sod back up there. And we lived in it then over another year. But we used to have some awful storms in this country. Cyclones, and snowstorms, and windstorms.
Have any prairie fires?
Yeah, my mother, was one of our neighbors brought in a bunch of cattle. I think there was 7 or 8 head. He had them, ropes tied around their neck, then had them tied to his wagon with ropes long enough that they didn't get crowded, you know. And Mother went up to their place to
Did she mention the mistletoe when she was mentioning the Christmas thing? Well, there was abundance of mistletoe. It was just everywhere. All the dead.
But anyway, Mother had gone up to this neighbor to get some milk, and when coming home, somebody had got a fire back of her, and she just had to run home. Run till she got to our place, and Dad had plowed 8 or 10 foot in from the line in case of fire. And that was about the first plowing he done when he got settled there, to kind of protect his place from getting burnt out. And she had to run with her milk clear down to the line where she'd get on Dad's plowed ground. And Mae was just a little tot. She about a little over a year old. And she and I sat out on the north side of the house, of our home, and we both was crying, wondering where our mother was, you know, because she said she wouldn't be gone long. And finally she come.
Did she mention the
but
wild
she had
fruit?
to run from that fire. And one time my dad was still working over Perkins with the sawmill, and he was quite a smoker. So he was sitting up there, riding along, you know, and when he got started, he had to put his pipe stem in his mouth and strike a match and light it and threw the match down, and the grass caught fire, and he liked to run his horses to death, keeping them ahead of the fire. Mm-hmm. So they both fought a fire during the first year.
You mentioned wild fruit.
Well, and the wild fruit, the wild plums. They're the most delicious plum that you could imagine, all up and down the Cimarron. I expect there was not just tens of bushels, there was hundreds.
Trails came up through here?
The Indian Trail.
The Indian Trail.
Yeah, they rode singles and singles, you know, just one on one side and one on the other. And the center of the road would be, maybe a foot higher than the bottom. And when my folks would go to visit one of the neighbors, for anywhere close to these roads, I'd get out far in the middle, you know, and walk along. So I'd be almost as big as Dad was. I thought I was quite a grown up.
And you say you remember the cattle drives coming up?
Oh, yes.
And what year was the last drive?
Well, I think it was in about 91.
And your father bought how many head?
7 head and 4 good milk cows in the bunch. And he sold 2 to the butcher in town, and he killed one for our own meat, and we just divided it around among the neighbors to get so we wouldn't let any of us spoil.
Yeah.
Because the farmer didn't have any way of curing that beef. You can always salt pork down and keep it, but you can't salt beef.
That's why they butchered in the wintertime mainly?
I guess so. Yeah, the farmer.
And you say that your mother was just as good a shot as your father? And they'd go out and get...
Was done what?
You say that your mother was as good a shot as your father?
Oh, yes. She just go out and shoot that one. One night Dad was, during the week when Dad was over at Perkins, and we were just seeing us 3 girls there by ourselves, and she thought she saw there was some man across the creek that runs between us and the highway, and there was a one-room house built over there. I forget whether it was a sod house or just a little frame joint. But anyway, about sundown, she thought she saw this guy over there walking around, and so she got her a chair. That was before we got the roof on the house. We was still sleeping in the wagon. And she got her, brought out one of the chairs from where we ate, and sat down by the wagon, and put a gun across her knees and sat there all night, waiting for that guy to show up. And if he'd showed up, she'd just shot him. But he didn't show up.
What kind of wild game did you have here?
Oh, we had quail and rabbit and wild turkey and wild chicken. Just anything was good to eat.
Well, I think we have covered most everything, I believe.
Lived our lives over.
Did you work during World War II?
In World War II?
Yeah, World War II.
No, I didn't. I'll tell you, we lived on the farm. My husband was a farmer. We lived on the farm 8 years, but the last 2 years of that time, he worked on the railroad out of Oklahoma City, and I stayed on the farm. We bought that farm, gave $3,000 for it, and then I had to live on it 5 years, and we had to live on it. We couldn't just say, that's mine, and go ahead and live where we please. But we had to live on it 5 years before we could get a deed to it. Well, he worked out of Oklahoma City then about 2 years on the railroad. Then he was a railroader for about 5 or 6 years. And we lost he put in a wheat crop of 200 acres to build us a new house on. And our family had increased, so we had to rent a big house after we lived on this place 5 years. This oldest boy, the one that lives here in town, was born, and we had to have more room. We just had one room and then a shed kitchen. We lived in for 5 or 6 years. And, well, anyway, we moved to town. We lost our big wheat crop, 200 acres of wheat we planted in to build us a house. We lost it with the green bugs. And if we hadn't had a threshing machine of our own, we wouldn't have done anything with what little wheat we harvested. But we did thresh out 300 bushels of wheat off of that 200 acres of ground. So I asked my husband what he's going to do that fall, if he's going to, rent more ground or fault. We still owned our home, but the house wasn't big enough to support us all yet. So he said, well, I guess you have to go to railroad, go back to railroad. And I said, well, your wife's going to railroad too. So we moved to Guthrie. We were married down here. My oldest sister and I were married at the same time. We were married in the old Guthrie Hotel by Judge Foster. And we both married prairie men. So we lived up there about 7 miles from each other. And traded to the same town every Saturday. And visited back and forth real often. And when he said he was going to railroad, I told him I was going to railroad too.
What year was that?
1907.
1907.
Just
Before statehood.
Yeah. We lived in Red House for about a year and a half on the west side. And then during that time, he bought the 2 lots up on East Spring in the 600 block and had his house started. And bang went our dream. And moved everything to Oklahoma City. So the railroad and everything went to Oklahoma City. So Oklahoma City gave us quite a jolt. But anyway, we lived through it. He went ahead and finished up his house, our house, and in the place of keeping roomers, I had his boarding too. That was all that, and I did all my work. I even baked my bread and my pies and my cakes, and took care of that whole house, and had 2 youngsters to take care of. So.
What was the Dust Bowl like?
Huh?
The Dust Bowl.
Oh, that was terrible. We lived in Hutchinson, Kansas at that time. We lived there in Oklahoma, and we lived here in Guthrie about 18 years. 19, about 19 years, I guess. We lived in the home we built 18 years. Then we moved to Hutchinson, Kansas, and he was a traveling man. He quit railroading, went to traveling. I fussed around because he wasn't home very often when he's on the railroad. He's one end of the line or the other end, and we was sitting there in the middle. So he got home that night and he said, well, I quit my job. It gave me quite a jolt. I said, well, what are you going to do now? And he said, well, I've already got a job. He said, I had my job before I quit the old one. He went to work for the J.I. Case Company out of Oklahoma City and worked for the J.I. Case Company for about 17 or 18 years. Well, then they transferred him to Hutchinson, Kansas, and he sold, we lived in there. We lived up there about 8 years. Then we sold a big home. We had a beautiful home in Hutchinson, big 12-room, another big home. And when we bought it, why, he said, now this is a home. He said, we're just not going to keep boarders up here. But in about 2 weeks he come home and I had 5 high school teachers boarding rooms with me. I got about $200 a month off of the 5.
What was the dust storms like in Hutchinson?
Oh, it was terrible. He came home one weekend and stayed, and then I went out with him the next and traveled with him for a week. And we went to Colorado doing that dust storm. And it was awful. Just went out there and we couldn't see across the street for the sand and dust. But we lived through all of it.
How long did the dust storms last?
Oh, I don't know. It was long enough that we had wire fences, posts way up here like that. And you could just see the top of those posts once in a while. You just stacked that sand and dust up like that.
How'd you keep it out of your house?
We didn't keep it out. We just had to keep working at it. But it didn't hit us as bad as it did west. Out closer to Colorado, it got serious.
Mrs. Poteet, what did you do during the Dust Bowl?
What?
What did you do? What was your impression of the Dust Bowl in the 30s with all the big dust storms? Where were you?
Where was I when?
In,
when that had that storm?
in
They forgot me and left me in the house.
No, this is the dust storms. You know, the Dust Bowl with all the dust.
Oh, yes. Oh, I thought you meant that storm I told about. Well, when I talked about that storm what I told you about, when the storm was over, they missed me. And they'd all went to the cave and left me in the house. I was just asleep as sound as could be. I was just a babe about 4-year-old. Well, in the dust storm, we were farming out south of town. And I compared getting spanked during that time. We had, of course, there was a shortage of feed. The cattle was sold and some of them was killed and so on. But we didn't want to kill our cattle. So we sat down one evening and talked it over. I had the best husband in the world. So I thought so. But anyway, he talked about those cows. Pretty little Jersey cows, you know. And I always loved stock. So we had 4 friends, young married couples that had babies that didn't have a cow. Well, you know, if you sold them on the market, they wouldn't bring over $12. And I said, let's let Nell and Jelly and the other 2, I said, let's give them a chance. If they want to buy one of those cows at $1 a month for a year, that'd be $12 a cow. And they'd pay for them $1 a month. Of course, they had to work for practically nothing, you know, maybe $1, $1.50 a day. And where a man had a wife and maybe 1 or 2 little ones, that was a pretty big problem. So anyway, we sold 4 of our best Jersey heifers for $12 apiece and got rid of them that way. Now that was on account of the shortage of feed caused by the Dust Bowl. Well, anyway, we didn't kill any of ours. We got rid of all of them without being killed. But we sold a registered, now we had Jersey cows. But we nearly always, about every so often, we'd buy a thoroughbred shorthorn bull because we wanted the abundance of milk as well as the grain. So anyway, we paid $300 and we sold that 1,600-pound bull for $1 a pound, $1.100, $16.
What were the dust storms like?
Oh, it was
Well,
terrible.
it just blew dust into everything. You just couldn't keep it out. You could hang a wet blanket over a window, but the dust would get in.
My husband come home with one weekend, and he wanted to go. We had a half sister that lived at Crenshaw, Colorado, and we went to see her during this storm. And
Then you know
just couldn't see
they
it
wouldn't let you
anything.
have. We was so short of feed. They wouldn't let you have but so many hogs, and I like to got in bad. We had so many hogs. Well, they had a record of it. Well, Bud had a wedded sister that had a bunch of little children. And he come home from town and he said, you know, they're just having it hard. I said, well, there's no use in sitting around talking about it. Let's do something to help. He said, well, how can we? We can't hardly help ourselves. I said, let's butcher one of those pigs and take into her. If they've got meat, they can rustle for bread. That'd help out. So we butchered that without recording. I didn't have sense enough to know we ought to report it. We're supposed to report it, you know. Well, in a few days, they never could keep me quiet. I was always doing something. In a few days, there was an old man come along with an old, poor, thin sow. And I bought that sow. Then when he made his report, he sold a sow to Mrs. Poteet. So I later went to jail again. But they got it cleared up finally. Mm-hmm. So that's the kind of, it was a deal now, believe me, it was. Well, anyhow, one of our neighbor boys had been trying to get started, and he concluded it wasn't any use, and he was going to have a sale. Well, we'd cut our feed down, and they had lifted the ban. And it had come a little rain, and things looked a little better. So anyhow, we went to Bud Custer's sale. Well, Bud and Dick Herwig was sitting over on the wagon tongue visiting, and they put up the prettiest little heifer, just ready to be fresh. Couldn't get a bit on her. And the auctioneer was acquainted with us all. He said, "May, you ought to buy this cow." I said, "All right, $10." He said, "Sold." And I bought it. Then I went up to where my husband was sitting, and I said, "Yes, well, get your black snake whipped. You're going to whip me." He said, "Now what have you been up to?" I said, "I bought a cow." He said, "Bought a cow? Why, May, we can't hardly feed what we've got." I said, "Well," she just looked at me and rolled up her pretty eyes, and I just couldn't keep from bidding on her, and I bought her. Well, he said, "Now you're going to have to drive this team while we get her home." We lived about a mile and a half. Well, the horses got to cutting up, and he had to quit and take over I had to get out and turn the lines over to him. The horses got uneasier from the crowds, you know. Well, I had to walk and drive that cow, and she wanted to lay down every 4 inches that she walked. So anyway, we got the cow home. Well, in about a month, she had a calf. And the next summer, when it come threshing time, Bud said, "May, we're going to have to borrow some money to go through a harvest." I said, "Oh, I sure hate to borrow money." He said, "Well, what can we do?" I said, "Now, Miss Birch asked me the other day, they run a grocery store and a butcher shop, a good friends." I said, "Miss Birch asked me the other day if I had any idea where they could get some good dressed meat." Said that it was just hard to get. See, everything had been killed off. He said, "Now that's your calf. You don't want to kill that." I said, "Well, the emergency might cause me to change my mind." And we addressed that calf, and she brought $37.
Did that get you through?
That long was just a short time before I'd bought her mother for 10. And then in the next summer, in the harvest time, she sold 37. Of course, we killed her and dressed her, and that was a bitter pill. We sure hated to do it.
Was that enough money to get you through?
What is it?
Was that enough money to get you through harvest? The $37?
It was, well, no, I don't know what but it helped Clara, it helped pay it. We probably had a little, but then we needed it, and then that tided us over.
What did you do during World War II?
Farm.
Did you farm?
When we left the jail, we left on account of my husband's health. And we moved out there, and we had it pretty hard for a little while. And I was used to being active. I never could be idle. I was here, I've got to have something to do all the time. And our nephew we had bought 40 acres. Well, we had bought 80 acres, but we had a government loan, school land loan, for $500 to help pay out the second 40. But we had 80 acres. Well, the nephews had put the place in cotton right up to the house. Just everything was in cotton. Well, they was picking cotton, and I went out where they were, and I picked and put in their sack. And Ralph said, "Babe, we're having trouble getting our cotton picked." Cotton hadn't dropped clear down yet. And he said, "Would you pick cotton?" I said, "Sure." I said, "I just sat in that house there and sat till I said, I've got the setter's blues." I said, "I just can't put up with it." And I said, "Now, Bud," he said, "what do you do with Uncle Bud?" I said, "I'll get a blanket and bring out here and put under that shade tree and let him lay down out there." I said, "He'd be better off outside with lung trouble, TB." So I picked 200 pounds. Well, that's $4. At that time, they were paying $2.00. Well, Bud said, I don't want you to pick cotton. And I said, well, and I said, now you're sick. You can't help yourself. I said, I'm going to pick cotton. So he laid, I'd take him out and make a lunch for him. And I picked 5,000 pounds of cotton.
That's a lot
Didn't
of
hurt
cotton.
me a bit. I was tan, went a little bit windblown. I'd been in town so long. But you know, I was happy to be doing something. And when we went to town, I went to see the doctor, and the doctor examined Bud, and he said, Bud, you're better. He said, what's happened to you? Oh, he said, that old woman of mine made me live outdoors. He said, you know, the doctor was old Dr. Cottrell, and he was a prince of a man. And he said, May, what did you do? I said, well, I went out just to help to volunteer, and I just fell into a job. And I said, I just picked cotton all over the neighborhood. I said, as far as Bud could walk, well, I picked cotton. And I said, we were both so much better off as extra of the money. And he said, well, laying on that warm earth and out in the fresh air, I suppose is what helped him. And he lived 25 years. And he wasn't supposed to live but 6 months.
Where did you have the cotton ginned?
Cotton gin, old here, Guthrie.
Do you know who the manager was of the gin? Who was the manager of the gin?
Oh, who was it?
Coyle?
Who?
Coyle.
Well, sure. Coyle. Coyle that later on built the Coyle Hotel. I know I own a hotel here.
Coyle's cotton gin.
Well, I think we've about run the gamut of everything.
Yeah, you about found out all about the Cravens girl.
I don't think I didn't get very far with this because I couldn't get it settled down. I couldn't get it. But anyway, now this is what I wrote. Taught one month school at South Riverside during the sickness of a teacher, Mrs. Lon Muxlow.
What year was that?
Well, I was 15. I was born in 89, 10 was 99, and 5.
Before 1904.
I can still count. I can't remember, but I can't. No salary, just a volunteer. Collected for the Guthrie Daily Leader 2 years, 19 months and 11. Nursed some for Dr. Duke at the Duke Sanitarium. Collected 4 days and nursed 2. After marriage, Mr. Poteet was appointed deputy sheriff and jailer at the old federal jail. Can't read my own writing. I overseen the trustees who did the cooking in the kitchen, 6 of them. I bought all the groceries and made out the menus. And searched the women and helped with the bookkeeping and helped the doctor whenever he come on every day. I had to go with him to see the sick ones. We had 135 prisoners. And in that many, there was always, so many of them were drug, now I didn't write that down, but so many of them were had the drug habit, and they'd have, where they used the needle, they'd have abscesses, and we'd have some awful ones. And then every time, I think several times, they'd pick up common law wives, and quite often they'd miscarry. I helped with that. I know that was at first it was a little bit embarrassing. There'd be just the men trustees and me and the doctor. And then we got to, I didn't write this down, but we got to a bunch of trustees in, and I'd always write their letters. And I said, wouldn't you boys like to learn at least to sign your name? Yes, they said they just never had any chance to go to school. We had the southeast corner. Oklahoma is divided into eastern, western, and the central. in three portions. We was here at Guthrie, we had the central and the eastern prisoners. We fell heir to those prisoners. Well, that's right over there close to Arkansas. And a lot of them just couldn't even sign their name. Well, after I got one, I sent one of the boys up, and they let me have one trustee I could trust to send uptown. And I had him to go to Crest and get a copybook. And from that, and a 5-cent, a big old, big chief tablet. And I taught, and you know, from that on, I always had 3 and 4 in the kitchen. I was there 7 years. And there was and all the time there, there'd be 3 or 4 that was trying to learn to read and write. And then they could just sign their name. They was happy about it. Then when they could write their wife's name, and then write the word love, that was the 3 first things they wanted to write. So I did that. Busy. Went to work at 6 in the morning, got off at 3, went back out at 5, and got off at 7. I worked 7 days a week. I worked 3 years before I ever had a day off. For a change, once in a while, they'd let me go with them to take someone to Norman. If they had a woman patient, why they needed a woman along, so they give me that. We had an old big colored woman here in town that would come in and oversee the kitchen, and the rest of them just have to get by. Mm-hmm. Then I helped take the children to the children orphanage. We had some awful cases.
Well, I think we've almost used 2 tapes.
Some back here.